That's me. Thank you. No. Are you saying check check? Mm-hmm. Oh, that was you saying check check? Yes, yes. Okay. I was checking on the audio, making sure there's no thing. All right, everybody, I'm going to put it on mute.
Yeah.
Of course, I don't Oh, you good though, right? If I can use it.
Yeah.
You definitely try to.
What's it like? I told you.
How's up?
What's hey, what's going
Hey,
on?
how
Sir
are you?
Steve, all right?
Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't agree. I saw you.
Oh,
Blah, blah.
no worries.
You know the deal. Good to see you.
Good, you too.
Yeah, so, yeah, now we're just getting together at Yale. So make it yeah,
No, but that's great. It's great work.
gotta spread it all around.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you dress for
Yeah.
Monsieur. Yeah.
But because it was so, it all mishmashes around. I can even remember that. Time ago now. I had those were all day. I don't know. Because, the very first. Yeah. I can't stay, but I have to go to my.
Sorry. You could say that there's no talking rights.
I don't know.
But we wanted to do the Haitian national anthem together, so I've asked you to stand up and I'll try to. I'm not the best singer, but I know. And I hope everyone has a copy and can follow along. Haïti, la sel, yo c'est pour marcher, mais dans la mer, dans le temps, avec, pour guetter, nous faire, pour se mettre, nous, en nous marcher. Et dans la mer pour Haïti, car vie plus belle. En nous, les têtes ensemble. Pour Haïti, dans nos ancêtres, nous la peau, dans tout père, yo c'est pour nous-mêmes, mourir pour lui. C'est un cadeau, non, les frères, nous, c'est sans ancêtres, nous, yo qui découlé, pour nous, qu'aimer. Drapeau, nous aussi pour travail, mettez ensemble pour l'autre pays à respecter. Là aussi, là, c'est dans tout haïtien pour Haïti, dans nos ancêtres, c'est pour nous secret, c'est pour nous planter. C'est dans terre, toute force, nous chita. C'est libre à nous manger, en vie, en mourir ou à quel content, faut qu'elle abaille. C'est clé, poussé, comme pour garçon, pour nous vivre à sa force moyenne. Nous, Haïti, dans nos ancêtres, Dieu faut que nous capables. Voyons, garçon, avant moyen, mon parfait, rouler avec nous. C'est ça, fait tout, maman, tout papa, tous les beaux ici. Yo, l'école, yo, apprendre, yo, connaître. Facile, c'est des salines, toya, des faits pour être net dans ma forme. Kembe, une nationale, nous continuons à garder, nous réfléchir sur lui. Et oui, et parce qu'il n'y a pas qu'un bagage là-dedans, vraiment, si nous mettons en pratique, et causer à va régler. Mais tout, voilà, demander nous pour participer dans l'hymne, chanter l'hymne national avec nous. Ça m'a dit donc qu'il y a plusieurs traductions faites. Mais le dernier couplet, c'est un groupe qui est les voici là en bâtonnel, qui fait un pile de temps travail. Qui a été créé le dernier couplet ça et qui était assuré pour te joindre non des femmes qui participaient dans la bataille de révolution. Qui va nous Haïti pour être capable de mettre là. Parce qu'en pile fois, nous connaissons et monsieur toujours devant, mais sans nous-mêmes, en pile bagaille n'est pas fait. Et il y a un paquet de femmes qui ont participé dans la révolution haïtienne. Bien, nous connaissons, et nous ne pas connaissons, mais nous connaissons, nous campons là à cause de eux. Merci. Et puis, pour nous, I'm translanguaging, which is the idea or the theory of my mentor. So I move between languages at ease sometimes. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce someone who is very dear to me and the community, Dr. Cécile Axilien, who will be moderating the panel this afternoon. Dr. Axilien is Professor of French and Francophone Studies at the University of Maryland, specializing in Francophone, African, and Caribbean literatures, gender and sexuality studies, and film media studies. Her publications include Biodios, Haitian Popular Film Culture, published in 2023, The Anti-Racism World Language Classroom, published in 2022, which she co-authored, Teaching Haiti in 21, and English Haitian Girl Facebook in 2010. Her writing has appeared in Throughout, can't say that, and Latin American Commentator. She chairs the editorial group for women, gender, and families of color since 2019, and is the outgoing president of the Haitian Studies Association, which she held down for us for 2 years. So we were very, very, very thankful for her brilliance, her work, and her commitment to Haitian studies. So it's a pleasure to have you here with us in New York and moderating this program.
Honnête. Tout d'abord, je voulais remercier tout le monde, merci pour la présence, nous, parce que nous connaissons qu'il y a un bagage qui a passé. Nous choisissons pour nous là, nous savons notre engagement. I would like to thank everybody for being here this evening. And my job is at once simple and complex. I am going to try to read the biography of these two Mapu, but since it's in your program, and in the interest of time, I will just highlight just a few things. I'll start with Professor Marlene Doe, who is at Yale University. She's Professor of French, African American Studies and History. And she has so many books. I was telling her, I actually studied a woman that there are two of her and not just one. And the latest one is The First and Last King of Haiti, The Rise and Fall of Henri Christophe. She has Tropics of Haiti, recent literary history of the Haitian Revolution. And if you don't like to read, which some of my students don't, I'm not criticizing, she has an amazing podcast on the Neg Marron podcast. I think she has like 2 or 3 podcasts. I know I've used them in my class, and she basically take you on a fascinating tour. So I also recommend listening to her podcast. She has won many awards, including the Frederick Douglass Book Prize for her book, Awakening the Ashes, an Intellectual History of the Haitian Revolution. And again, you can read all about that in the program. The other speaker is Professor Franz Voltaire, who is a historian, filmmaker, and publisher based in Montreal. And Professor Voltaire has multiple degrees in history, political science, and international relations from universities in Chile and Canada. And for me, what is most important with Professor Voltaire is CTCA, and I think many of us know him and his work for the fact that he has really been, not just the last 10, 15 years when it has been easier to publish, but for the last 40 plus years, really giving opportunities for writers all over the world to publish on and about him. So for me, it's really a great pleasure because these two Mapus, they highlight the fact that it's important to keep working so that we can change the narrative around Haiti and present a more complex and complicated Haiti. So we are in for a great treat, and what will happen after, they will each have about 20 minutes for their presentation, and then I will give very, very short remarks. I'm very intimidated because I am not a historian. I'm a literary and cultural studies scholar. And then we will open it up for questions. So please help me welcome Professor Doe and Professor Voltaire. Thank
you. I will try, I have to say thank you to Lily to invite me to this panel. I will try to speak in French or in Creole because it will be easy for me. I don't know if it's a problem for the people who are there. Pas de problème, donc nous allons commencer en créole.
Microphone.
Hein? N'a pas la créole? Oui, oui, pas de problème. Hein? Oui. Donc, ma remercie d'abord Lily pour l'invitation. Takati n'a travaillé depuis peut-être plus d'un an. Nous entrons dans des discussions pour voir comment nous allier l'ensemble de network, une série d'institutions qui travaillent sur Haïti. C'est important, surtout dans la conjoncture mondiale n'a plus d'outils. Il est important que entre Montréal, New York, mais aussi à Paris, différents groupes qui travaillent sur Haïti au Cali. D'autant plus que question d'être là, je sais d'outils à ce que d'être là, nous allons parler. Mais question d'être là est fondamentale parce que sont questions qui commençaient à partir de 2003, dans des circonstances très particulières, les Aristides lançaient question restitution. Je pense que c'est mon premier élément pour nous comprendre, de restitution par réparation. Restitution a touché essentiellement ordonnance du 17 avril 1825. Et ce que l'historien Boustiga a parlé de la double dette. Boustiga a fait un magistral sous question ça entre 1825 et 1915. Donc, je pense que les n'a parlé de restitution, il faut séparer de réparation qui concernait tout afro-descendant. Il concernait tout afro-descendant parce que réparation il y a l'esclavage. Il y a la mise en esclavage de millions d'êtres humains que l'on considérait comme des biens meubles, suivant tous les codes noirs, que les codes espagnols, que le code français, que le code anglais, qui, pendant certains 100 ans, 300 ans, 400 ans, si nous avons remonté depuis l'établissement esclavage là, eh bien, il concernait non seulement tout afro-descendant dans les Amériques, il concernait tout afro-descendant en Afrique, tout africain autour, parce que c'est une ponction majeure et suivant son crime contre l'humanité qui, nous avons dit, ou pas qu'à effacer. Ou pas qu'à effacer parce qu'il y a des conséquences majeures sur la société. On ne pas oublier que le dernier pays qui a aboli l'esclavage dans les Amériques, c'est le Brésil. Avant ça, c'était Cuba. Et on a parlé de 1888. Mais même chaque fois, on va parler, ce n'est pas de l'histoire ancienne. Et l'aime d'ab regarder mon grand-père qui était fait en 1864, ça veut dire s'il était fait aux États-Unis, il était esclave. Donc, on n'a pas de bons problèmes qui concernaient toute société américaine en premier lieu, puisque c'est en Amérique mouillée, mais qui concernaient toute société africaine. Alors, moi-même, quand intervenu sous contexte et conditions que Haïti, et Léo dit Haïti, ce n'est pas Haïti, c'est voyez un gouvernement autoritaire, un gouvernement dictatorial qui acceptait paiement une dette qui paillonne, puisque n'a pas de bons rançons, puisque quand le baron de Marco arrive avec bateau, il menaçait de bombardement Haïti. Ils ont dit qu'ils allaient voter sur le temps et puis tout faut payer. Donc, sont conditions que Jodia, même plusieurs historiens français, acceptaient que son rançon. Ce n'est pas un accord que vous avez payé. Et c'était difficile. C'est peut-être la première fois que le monde qui gagne la guerre a payé le monde qui a perdu la guerre. Donc ça, c'est vraiment un cas exceptionnel. Et puis en France, il faut comprendre tout, on voit qu'il y a des éléments qu'on ne peut pas oublier, il y a un silence. Wolf qu'on parlait de silencing the past. Effectivement, un silence qui fait sous la révolution haïtienne, un silence qui fait, je dis à toujours l'Algérie. C'est deux problèmes que la France a confrontés et nous rendons compte que depuis 2003, il y a des avancées, des reculs, mais c'est un problème important pour Haïti, surtout dans les conditions haïtiennes. Bon, alors, moi-même, je vais essayer dans quel contexte que nous devons vivre en 1825. 1825, on rappelle, c'est-à-dire Pétion mourit en 1818. Christophe suicidé en 1820. Donc, Boyer, en 1818, il succède à Pétion. Boyer n'a pas aucun titre pour te succéder à Pétion. Boyer n'a pas participé comme officier supérieur de la guerre d'indépendance. Mais bon, il faut peut-être trop loin pour nous ramener, nous, que l'officier était capable, dans la République de l'Ouest, là, était capable de succéder à Pétion. Il était pris en position pour Rigaud en 1811. Donc, Bourgelat ou Bonnet, qui était gagné, on a dit légitimité pour être capable de président, il était déjà écarté au moment où Boyer, en 1818, accédait au pouvoir. Boyer, très rapidement, en 1820, c'est le suicide de Christophe. Du point de vue militaire, Boyer, très rapidement, il parle long campagne éclair, avant même que ceux comme Richard, comme Romain qui participaient après la tentative de renversement de Christophe là, d'établir en l'État du Nord, après royaume du Nord là, eh bien, voyez, il opéré un mouvement très rapide. D'ailleurs, qui mouvement qui a échoué, puisque les là, naïf, à ce moment-là, les arrivés Gonaïve, il pas bien toute troupe là. Mais il fait deux mouvements qui, à mon avis, étaient capitales. Il bloqué Saint-Marc parce que non, mais Bonnet, donc, mon adversaire potentiel comme commandant Saint-Marc, car c'était jusqu'à sa mort, commandant Saint-Marc. Et deuxièmement, l'aile rentré au Cap, il va le nommer Mani. Mani, son carrière très particulière, c'est commandant de la garde d'honneur de Toussaint l'Ouverture, et qui s'est illustré à la crête à Kéo, mais Mani fait défection avec Troublio, il était Saint-Marc qui fait défection dans l'Ouest. Et Mani, en ce sens, il y a adhésion des nouvelles élites dans le Sud et l'Ouest, parce que Mani, c'est aussi, et puis ça, son bail, son ancien livre, son noir libre. Et donc, Mani, effectivement, d'ailleurs, si la toponymie a renseigné nous, on a regardé les reconstruits Pétionville, que les seuls noirs libres, les seuls qui parlent libres de couleur, c'est Mani, Lambert, Toussaint, toute rue, l'ouverture, toute rue Pétionville, dans le centre-ville, ce sont des livres, ce que vous avez les têtes des anciens livres. Vous différenciez des livres nés à la fois de l'insurrection de 91, de la proclamation de son tournage en 1793 et 94. Donc, à partir de ce moment, vous voyez, arrive à réunir l'ensemble de l'ancien territoire de la colonie française. Mais deuxième élément qui est important, c'est qu'en 1822, au moment où Núñez de Cáceres proclamait l'indépendance sous le nom d'Haïti espagnol, vous voyez, pour organiser troupes et la rentrer dans cet Haïti espagnol que Núñez de Cáceres proclame. Pour trois raisons, rapidement. Une, c'est que Núñez de Cáceres a proclamé République. Livré lui-même, dans la perspective, c'est réunifié avec la Grande Colombie. Deux, c'est qu'il n'a pas aboli l'esclavage. Et ça, c'est le seul point d'acadie idéologique d'entente dans toute l'île à ce moment-là. Et trois, où il y a la presqu'île de Samana, pour des raisons. Nous sommes à l'époque de la navigation à voile. Or, toute bateau qui a traversé l'Atlantique, il faut longer les côtes de Samana avant de descendre sous nord-ouest là, sous nord-est là, pour arriver au Cap. Donc, effectivement, Samana a un intérêt stratégique pour cette armée haïtienne. Mais il y a l'autre problème, Samana, parce que Samana, les colons français qui étaient fuis Saint-Domingue au moment de l'indépendance, ils ont établi l'esclavage, ils ont établi le Samana et ils ont eu une négociation pour faire de Samana un nouveau territoire français. Donc, alors, même contexte là. Donc, en 1822, vous voyez qu'on a unifié sans réellement que tu aies gagné des soulèvements militaires. L'intégrant partie des élites dominicaines, dans ce que certains historiens dominicains comme Moya Ponce parlaient de la domination meldiana, c'est-à-dire une situation côté les dirigeants du nouvel État unifié sont haïtiens essentiellement, mais dominicains tout aussi bien. Et quoi, dans le Parlement haïtien, donc, notamment la Chambre des représentants des élites dominicaines qui participaient là. Donc, contrairement à la vulgate dominicaine, au discours narratif dominicain, d'ailleurs, c'est intéressant, toute proclamation Boyau fait en deux langues. Il fait en français, il fait en anglais. Donc, on rend nous compte que, et puis il y a des études qui étaient faites par l'historienne dominicaine qui, yoté bali comme tâche dans l'archive dominicaine, analysé des archives notariales et lui montrer toute relation qui gagnait entre ces élites haïtiennes et ces élites dominicaines à l'époque. Relation qui se perpétue encore aujourd'hui. Hein. Et où on nous compte que ils participé dans le mariage, ils participé dans la mais chef militaire au d'Haïti. Pas de colonisation haïtienne de ce qui deviendra la République dominicaine. Parce qu'une colonisation a supposé un transfert de population, alors que la population haïtienne était plus de 600 000 à l'époque et la population de la partie dominicaine pas de 60 000. Donc rapidement, la colonisation, ça t'a dit, un autre modèle économique pour aller en place. Donc au moment de 1825, vous voyez, règne sur toute l'île. Donc, deuxièmement, à l'échelle internationale, la possibilité pour la France d'une reconquête reste impossible. Les deux tentatives françaises, c'était d'imposer une ordonnance là en 1825, une tentative qui fait sous Souloutou, côté de tenté de menacer que Souloutou, en cas de Paris, il résiste. Il dit, souvenir pour vous mettre à bout. Donc, Français n'ont pas de capacité. Ils ont une capacité pour te bombarder la capitale. Ils ont une capacité pour faire quelques blocus, mais pas de capacité de reconquête. Et à mon avis, déjà, les élites françaises ont commencé à abandonner l'idée d'une reconquête. Mais ça a été vrai essentiellement, et ça c'est, les colons qui ont réclamé un paiement d'une indemnité. Laquelle indemnité, c'est 10% de la remboursée à partir de 1700. Je prends date chiffre à partir de 1780. Donc, on clair sur ça que possibilité pour réinstaller dans l'île était dérisoire. Il y a une tentative qui fait sous Louis XVIII, il était même pour des lettres côté la demandé, il dit à l'époque à Pétion, n'a pas reconnaître que 50 dirigeants comme des blancs, Et n'a pas le bail possibilité pour comprendre que nous sommes à Napoléon, moi-même tout, nous sommes contre Napoléon. Napoléon, son usurpateur littéraire, donc on y a souverain légitime. Mais c'était impossible parce que dans le contexte de l'époque, dans le contexte de la guerre d'indépendance, son guerre qui était à la fois son guerre d'extermination que les Français ont mené, et on rend nous compte que les Français ont développé, c'était dépeupler l'île et repeupler. Donc, on a gagné au moins un consensus général que fin de l'esclavage, consensus général que la question de l'indépendance est fondamentale. Or, voyez, en 1821, juste avant la conquête, enfin, pour l'imposition de la souveraineté haïtienne sur l'ensemble de l'île, en 1821, c'est le Congrès de Panama. Le Congrès de Panama, rappelez-nous que l'appui donné en 1816 par Pétion à Bolivar, il faut comprendre, ils vont soumettre à embargo, et on peut faire des comparaisons comme aujourd'hui, hein, les pays qui soumettent à embargo. Qui capacité dirigeante pour résister à l'embargo? D'abord, il y a un élément qui est important, c'est l'interdiction presque ou la pression qu'Haïti n'a pas de marine. C'est-à-dire qu'il y a cabotage, il y a des activités de corsaire, mais pas de marine. Et chaque tentative qui était faite pour faire commerce sous bateau haïtien, des fois, on capture le vent en esclavage, le vent marin en esclavage. Donc, mon premier problème qui pose, c'est que Haïti soumet en embargo l'île pour toutes sortes de raisons à une guerre dévastatrice. Je regarde des destructions qui fait, ne serait-ce que dans la plaine du Nord, je dirais c'est presque l'équivalent de la vente de la Louisiane. Destruction qui fait à toute plantation. Mais il y a des changements technologiques qui opèrent entre temps. C'est-à-dire Cuba va rentrer comme producteur à la fois dans ces années, commencer les débuts de colonisation sucrière à Cuba, commencer les débuts de colonisation caféière. Colonisation caféière était plus due dans l'Orient cubain avec, à partir de Santiago jusqu'à les Punta Maïsi, Cuba, donc l'Orient cubain, où il y a un développement de culture caféière et d'une région caféière que les Français ont fait avec l'esclavage. Et donc, où il y a une sorte de zone franco-espagnole, parce que le colon français est entré en Cuba, il est entré avec, effectivement, sorte d'occasion technologie du 19e siècle, alors que les colons espagnols étaient une technologie du 16e siècle. Bon. Tout ça pour dire que au moment où Boyer va louer l'ancienne, Haïti reste encore une fois isolé. Est-ce que maintenant, pour dirigeants haïtiens, essentiellement Boyer, parce que Boyer sont autocrates, en clair sur ça, que décision c'est contre la vie des fois même de ses conseillers qui étaient hésitants, les Ogassi ordonnances là. Donc, à mon avis, pour bien gagner, un élément qui est important pour nous comprendre, c'est que pour Boyer, parce qu'il faut nous rappeler nous tous que dirigeants, ça jusqu'à Soulou, c'est des coloniaux, ils ont fait Saint-Domingue, ils ont élevé, et peut-être on n'a pas insisté trop. À partir de 1794, c'est-à-dire quand l'Assemblée en France, reprendre qu'en 793, son tournax est déclaré d'Acadie la liberté générale, de 1794 à 1804, au moment de l'indépendance haïtienne, tout le monde a vu c'est français. C'est tout ces français. L'armée haïtienne est une armée française. Donc, le contexte des coloniaux et surtout de Boyer, c'est un contexte de normalisation. Est-ce que vous pensez que normalisation, ça va entraîner des investissements français? Bon, vous pensez que c'était une erreur dramatique parce que 5 ans plus tard, après 1825, c'est la conquête de l'Algérie et désormais l'Algérie étant beaucoup plus riche que Saint-Domingue, l'Algérie va devenir le nouveau Saint-Domingue. Pour ça, c'est l'autre question. Deuxièmement, avant de finir, Ndaka dit, m'a essayé de comprendre quel contexte qui fait que nous signons une ordonnance par eux. Ordonnance, on peut comprendre du point de vue français. Charles X est un monarque absolu. Charles X, après que tu signé, c'est le fameux milliard des émigrés. Pas oublier que les émigrés, les nobles qui étaient émigrés pendant la Révolution, ils ont indemnisé parce que c'était une nationalisation des biens du clergé, c'était une nationalisation des biens des émigrés. Ils prennent sous le même modèle ça, ordonnance là, c'est le contexte ça pour nous comprendre ordonnance Charles X. C'est-à-dire indemniser les colons pour mettre question ça en arrière de problématiques françaises. Donc, pour nous-mêmes, dirigeants haïtiens de l'époque, et surtout Boyer, ils ont pensé que peut-être en signant cette ordonnance, ils allaient entrer dans le processus côté la France qui a investi. Mais la France, en 1825, n'avait pas la capacité pour le réintervenir Saint-Domingue. Et en plus, il y a des changements technologiques qui étaient faits à partir de ça. C'est pas par hasard, pour ceux qui s'intéressent à la Jamaïque va abandonner, va finir sur ça, va abandonner en grande partie investissement majeur, l'implantation sucrière, parce que les terres sont épuisées. Les terres sont épuisées en grande partie pour régénérer. Et ce n'est pas par hasard que côté anglais au Bradé, ils vont aller en Guyane, Benelala, Yopradé tout, Trinidad et Tobago, qui sont les nouvelles zones de production sucrière. Donc, il y a des conditions objectives qui changent. Par contre, et Cuba va devenir la nouvelle zone de présence, que ce soit dans le café, qui déplaçait le café haïtien, ou dans la canne à sucre, côté les techniciens, les Français, il n'y a pas de capitaux pour entrer là-dedans. Ce n'est même pas écrit Haïti. Les généraux qui système ils vont mettre en plein milieu côté que tu as un sucre. Ils vont mettre un système de moitié, parce qu'il n'y a pas de ressources, il n'y a pas ni technologie, ni savoir-faire pour reprendre la grande production. La grande production demande des savoir-faire, demande des technologies, demande un marché. Ce qui n'est plus le cas. Parce que la France déjà avait remplacé la canne à sucre en grande partie par le sucre de betterave. Donc, pour moi-même, pour essayer de comprendre ensemble éléments ça, pour nous comprendre dans quelles conditions ça fait là. Parce qu'en général, nous comprenons sur un plan strictement politique, mais nous sous-estimons le contexte économique. C'est même bien là, études qui ont fait soit Haïti, ils n'ont pas jamais abordé les questions de production. Sauf peut-être très rarement au 19e siècle, des gens comme Edmond Paul, avec l'impôt sur le café, qui avait abordé le grand problème, et Haïti va le vivre pendant tout le 19e siècle, là, sur la rente caféière payée par la paysannerie haïtienne, qui va produire de la valeur comme l'abeille produit du miel. Et donc, ce n'est pas par hasard, c'est les spéculateurs qui vont le ramasser. Donc, même fini à continuer la conversation.
And now we have Professor Joe who's going to continue the conversation.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being in here this evening instead of out there where it's beautiful and nice weather. So on April 17th, 2025, Emmanuel Macron, the current president of France, you might have seen, issued a communiqué in which he established a joint Franco-Haitian commission destined to study the history and memory of the indemnity, which he called a heavy burden that France had put onto Haiti. However, there were many things missing from the communique, one which was the question of restitution, word not used anywhere in the communique, reparations. But on the historical level, there were also many, many problems. For example, Macron dates the beginning of this struggle between Haiti and France to 1814. And he does that for a very particular reason, because that's when Louis XVIII was restored to his throne for the first time. And this effectively allows him to absolve Napoleon of his crimes against humanity on Saint-Domingue and against independent Haiti, and also to forget the history of slavery and France's instantiation of a torturous system of slavery on the island. So I want to take us back to the years before, well before 1825, because I think it's very important that whatever conversations, memory projects, historical projects will ensue and come about from this Franco-Haitian Commission, that we must not let the French reshape of the narrative to re-silence the past by behaving as if it was the monarchs. This is a very particular language he's using that allows him to reinforce the idea that French republicanism is egalitarian and that the problem is the monarchs and royalists. And so in what I want to present today, I want to talk about how this is an entire centuries-long struggle that did not begin or end with the Bourbons. So if I took us to, for example, the Archives Nationales in France, which I always say, these are essentially evidence, lockers. They catalog the crimes of the French. And in fact, in the Archives Nationales in Pierrefitte, there are dozens of manuscripts and pamphlets from the first 2 decades of the 19th century that prove that France immediately plotted to retake the island and restore slavery, their words, soon after the Haitian Declaration of Independence. So this was not just when the Bourbons came back to power. Nearly all of the Saint-Domingue restoration proposals under Napoleon and his successors, Louis XVIII, Charles X, they suggested exterminating the majority of the Haitian population, again, the specific word they used, if their leaders refused to submit to another word the French used, their supremacy. These genocidal takeover plots threatened independent Haiti under all its first leaders, including Haiti's founder, Dessalines, assassinated in 1806, Henri Christophe as king, who ruled in the north until 1820 when he committed suicide, and Alexandre Pétion, of course, simultaneously president over the Republic in the south and west until 1818. By the time their successor, President Jean-Pierre Boyer, signed the Indemnity Agreement in 1825, the French had in fact been openly plotting to restore slavery and exterminate the Haitian populace for decades. This story of plotted genocide is essential to understanding the threat of violent war, not merely financial exploitation, that 19th century Haitians lived with ever since, in the words of Dessalines, they dared to be free. But as the Haitian historical sociologist Jean Casimir made painfully clear in a documentary about the Haitian Revolution from 2020 called Independence or Death, the whole enterprise of Atlantic slavery was genocidal. The yearning to exterminate is germane to colonial slavery, and all roads in colonial thought lead there. If we want to understand how and why the indemnity came about in the first place, we must acknowledge and force the French to acknowledge the genocidal mentality of the colonists and enslavers who invented the scenario whereby they were the ones who had been wronged by the Haitian Revolution, rather than rightly overthrown by the people they were torturing and enslaving. Of course, they called the revolutionaries, the freedom fighters, brigands, terrorists, insurrectionists, every epithet. So the French, after they formally take over the western side of the island in 1697, they accelerate the course of plantation slavery by leaps and bounds. Before the 18th century had concluded, the French had forcibly transported nearly 900,000 captive Africans to use their very human hands to painstakingly produce the sugar, coffee, cotton, and indigo that enriched white Europeans at the expense of Black Africans. Those captive Africans who survived the long journey from their continent to the Caribbean ordinarily arrived on Saint-Domingue in a terrible state. Sold off to the highest bidders, their misfortunes only increased when their enslavers branded their family names on their chests using hot irons. By the 1770s, slavery in Saint-Domingue was already infamous. The French naturalist Hilaire d'Auberteuil, sent by the French crown to Saint-Domingue, for the purpose of recording the colony's natural history, lamented the sorry state of affairs that had led Saint-Domingue to become a society of terror and torture. These are his words. And remember, he's sent there by the King of France. The majority of the Negroes from Guinea ordinarily die after the first 3 years of being transported. And the laborious life of a Negro born in the country does not usually surpass 15 years. Since 1680, we have introduced more than 800,000 Negroes into the colony, he continued. Nevertheless, at this time, 1770 to 1772, there exist only 290,000. It is not diseases that have weakened the Black population to this extent, he concluded. It is the tyranny of their masters. Hilaire de Berthoët hoped that French laws governing slavery, called the Code Noir, could prevent the colonists from continuing their abuse, which he noted was harming the colony economically. He said the slaves perished daily under chains or under the whip and were knocked out, suffocated, and burned without any judgment of guilt. Asking the people of France to hear these lamentations resulted in the censorship of the French naturalist book. They pulled it out of circulation because its truths, even though Hilaire de Berthoët was no abolitionist, no anti-slavery activist, he's writing this in order to reform the system, suggest reforms, not eliminate it. But in fact, it's the very tortures described by Hilaire de Berthoët that would eventually inspire the successful slave rebellion in 1791 that forced the French to formally abolish slavery on the island in 1793, 1794. Napoleon Bonaparte came to power in France in 1799. Yet, even though he professed to be a profound French Republican, he was animated by the same prejudices against enslaved Black people and Africans as the monarchs of the Ancien Régime. Bonaparte, of course, sends his brother-in-law, Leclerc, on his infamous expedition to bring back slavery in 1802, but Napoleon, in fact, also expressed explicitly racist beliefs during his rule, such as saying that if he had been in power at the time of the abolition in 1794, he would never have entertained such an idea. And in fact, he would have fought on behalf of the British to stop it from happening. So when he sends Leclerc, this expedition is going to take on the same genocidal and prejudicial cast from the person who created it. Leclerc wrote to Bonaparte on October 2nd, 1802, that the mission in Saint-Domingue could only succeed if the French were, quote, to destroy all the Negroes of the mountains, men and women, to only keep around children younger than 12 years old, to destroy the majority of those in the plain, and to not leave alive a single person of color who has ever worn an epaulette. When Leclerc died of yellow fever in November 1802, Saint-Domingue's former governor, General Rochambeau, succeeded him. And he stated in no uncertain terms when he addressed Bonaparte in April 1803 that even after the arrest of Louverture, the ailing French military was in need of, quote, 3 forceful combined expeditions to fight, disarm, and chain the Negroes forever. Slavery must be proclaimed again in this realm, he said, and the Code Noir made much more severe. I even think that for a time the masters must be given the right of life and death over their slaves, end quote. So although Haitians definitively won independence in 1804, of course, France did not recognize the new nation and continued to claim that Saint-Domingue was their colony. Ordinary members of the French populace and French officials alike never stopped scheming for the restoration of Saint-Domingue. In 1806, Saint-Domingue's former finance secretary, Henri Peru, addressed a detailed plan for reconquest to Napoleon, who made himself, of course, emperor in 1804. He said, if we only listened to revenge and justly irritated spirits, we would have to destroy every person in Saint-Domingue beyond the age of 8. This is him describing popular sentiment in France. Though aware that many in France would have loved nothing more than to witness such an extermination, Peru proposed instead that only those who dare to fight should be destroyed. We could deport to a colony not yet settled anyone else wearing an epaulette. A former French general named Kerverseau, stationed in Saint-Domingue during the Leclerc expedition and who had initially gone to the eastern side of the island after Haitian independence, also sent detailed reconquest plans to Napoleon. Like his predecessors, Kerverseau Kerverseau spoke of the need to, quote, exterminate the entire population, including the children. No conciliations for the Negroes should be made at all, Kerverseau warned. They want to be free, but the honor of the French name, the security of the West Indies, and indignantly outraged humanity cannot allow it, he said. The aura that once guaranteed the safety of the master and allowed one man to live in peace among 200 slaves is gone, Kerverseau concluded. The black man knows today that the white man is only a man. He knows that by killing the masters, he has already acquired independence. I should say also that one of the reconquest plans given to Napoleon was written also by André Rigaud, who possibly wrote that plan and then was released from prison on the basis of it. Even though Napoleon was busy fighting wars around the world and seemed for a time to lose sight of his loss in Saint-Domingue, it is true that his Bourbon successors wasted no time trying to come up with new schemes to retake the island. In 1814, under Louis XVIII's authority, the French Minister of the Marine sent 3 spies to Haiti. Their mission was to coerce Haiti's leaders to surrender. Malouet threatened that if they did not submit, the Haitian people would be, quote, treated as barbarous savages and hunted down like maroon Negroes, end quote. One of the spies, Doxian Lavais, even sent a letter to Christophe in which he unabashedly revealed that France was ready to, quote, replace the population of Haiti, which would be totally annihilated by the forces sent against it, end quote. After King Henry's men captured Medina, one of Malouet's men, and confiscated his instructions, the Baron de Vathey, one of the most prominent members of the Haitian king's administration, lamented that, these are his words, 25 years of misfortune and experience had failed to correct the irascibility of the ex-colonists. They have not let go of one iota of their iniquitous and barbaric system. They have not ceased to provoke the cabinet of Louis XVIII to lead it, like that of Bonaparte, into sending a similar expedition against us. They have not only advised it, but they have also offered, just like the first time, pecuniary means for it to be undertaken. First, they sent us spies, then commissioners, all of them ex-colonists, to insult us and offer us the choice between slavery or death. They conceived of plans of attacks, plans of extermination in their writings and pamphlets, all of which make nature tremble and which violate all the laws of religion, justice, morality, and humanity. Finally, they have proposed to exterminate our entire population, even suckling babies. Pétion behaved differently in the context of these French spies, who also went to his side of the island. At a meeting that he took, in fact, it took place one day after he responded with a kind of conciliatory letter to a similar missive that Christophe had written. The president told his 2 closest advisors, Joseph Inginac and Jean-Pierre Bouillet, that he would never consent to French reconquest. He did, however, open another fatal door when he said he was not opposed to paying, quote, a pecuniary indemnity to compensate the former French colonists for the loss of their properties. Christophe, for his part, was adamant that no indemnity would be paid, and he had an uncanny ability to thwart France's colonial games of manipulation. But the biggest threat to the kingdom's sovereignty in his eyes remained on Haiti's own shores. He felt perfectly capable of standing his ground on the world stage, even when friends like Thomas Clarkson urged him to consider a treaty of indemnity with France. On November 20th, 1819, Limonade, one of Christophe's secretaries, sent an important missive to the renowned British abolitionists. He insisted that any request for the people of Haiti to indemnify the French ex-colonists would quite simply be, in his words, inadmissible. Limonade went on to note that Christophe did not intend to deviate even, quote, 1 iota from the principles set forth in his November 1816 proclamation banning French people and their ships from the island. Christophe and his writers in the kingdom had very publicly insisted from the start of Haitian independence that the Haitian people would not and could not indemnify the French colonists. The Gazette Royale printed this stern rebuke in 1815 after learning of Pétion's offer. If Pétion tallied up the pain and torture the ex-colonists exacted upon the people they enslaved on this island, he would see on what side there would be compensation if there were to be any. And besides, what link could still exist between the master and the slave who has broken his chains? In his writings, Baron de Vatte repeatedly insisted, "It is the recognition of our independence that will forever protect us from the tyranny of our oppressors. Without this precondition, no treaty, no agreement," he said. "We want to be free and independent, and we will be despite the dishonorableness of the ex-colonists. Our independence will be guaranteed by the tip of our bayonets." Yet Christophe's successor, Boyer, eventually came to see the matter differently. In September 1819, the Royal Gazette of Haiti reported that in some Parisian journals, there were reports that Boyer had opened negotiations with Louis XVIII, which was true. The papers implied that the conversation was trending in a favorable direction for the ex-colonists. "We have been assured that Boyer's envoy has arrived in Paris with certain proposals, whereby the value of the amount of all the properties belonging to the French in that part of Saint-Domingue where he commands will be reimbursed to the dispossessed colonists per term in 20 years. The paper went on to say, "King Henry does not appear to be disposed to such an agreement like President Boyer." Another French paper is quoted in the Gazette as having wryly concluded that Pétion's successor, as we can see, Pétion's successor is following in his footsteps. He wants to make the people of the Southwest beholden to the ex-colonists. But of course, when the French couldn't re-enslave the Haitian people, Louis XVIII tried to implement another reconquest plan in 1816. They settled for impoverishing them. Baron de Macau, whom Louis XVIII's brother Charles X sent to deliver the disastrous Indemnity Ordinance, arrived in Haiti in July 1825, accompanied by a squadron of 14 brigs of war carrying more than 500 cannons. With the threat of violence looming on July 11, 1825, Boyer signed the document, which stated, "The present inhabitants of the French part of Saint-Domingue shall pay, in 5 equal installments, the sum of 150 million francs destined to indemnify the former colonists." But the colonists' dreams of what they were owed were as delusional as their belief in their superiority. The Haitian historian and poet Charles-Henri Dumel, who lived through the revolution and was employed in the Republic's government, wrote in 1824, "It must be noted that our eternal detractors, the ex-colonists, had proposed in 1805 that after their new conquest of Haiti, an easy feat according to them, 700 million francs would be paid to them for the restoration of their properties and delivered to them gradually and by way of a loan secured by national credit. So the first amount the French in fact asked for is 700 million francs. And the instructions given to Macau actually revealed that the determined sum of 150 million francs was meant to provide nearly 1 year's revenue for any colonist with a documented claim. The instructions also reminded the French diplomat that his mission was to deliver the ordinance as a fait accompli. "My mission to the people of our former colony is not a negotiation," Macau wrote. "I'm limited to explaining to them on what conditions His Majesty of France consents to grant their independence fully and entirely. I lack the powers to make the slightest modifications to the proposal of which I am the bearer." The French government hoped that the accompanying ships of war, this is in the instructions, would, quote, "excite distress in the government of Haiti," end quote. The instructions given to Macau by the French Minister of the Marine were marked very secret and stated that if the Haitian government, quote, "did not demonstrate gratitude for what His Majesty of France deigns to do for them," Macau was to announce to the leaders of that government that henceforth they will be treated as enemies of France, that already a squadron is ready to establish the most rigorous blockade in front of the ports of the island, that this squadron will soon be reinforced by other vessels sent from our ports, and that the interruption of all maritime commerce will cease for Saint-Domingue only after this island will have submitted without condition to the domination of France. They are effectively proposing to starve them by blockading the ports. Some contemporary scholars have questioned whether or not Haitian leaders, and Boyer specifically, believed that France was capable of bringing war and retaking the island. Yet 19th century Haitians were the ones who had to live through the constant threats of violence against them. And in fact, they were initially relieved to see their former enslavers finally recognize Haitian independence. The historian and politician Denis Valdelorme wrote of Boyer's consent that it had at first seemed great because Haiti was going to avoid war. This administration, which held the entire island in peace for 25 years, Delorme wrote, as a result of the new treaty concluded with Charles X, saw itself freed from apprehensions of a new war with the former metropole, which had hitherto preoccupied the public mind. Boyer also believed that recognition of Haiti's independence from France would lead to recognition from the rest of the world. But racism and empire were stronger pulls than humanity and justice. The United States, of course, did not recognize Haitian independence until 1862, when the Civil War had already begun. So I'll leave you with the words of the Baron de Vaté, who wrote in 1819 that it is the people who always suffer the most when their leaders make mistakes. They pay for these with their lives, with their souls, and with their livelihoods.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you to you both. There are so many things. I will just highlight a few key things, and then I am going to provoke a bit because first of all, thank you. I appreciate the way both of you provided key context. Professor Voltaire highlighted the issue of unification that was happening, and the fact that we cannot talk about reparation, restitution, indemnity without contextualizing them both politically, socially, and economically, and to also understand Boyer as an autocrat dictator. And Professor Doe specifically focuses on what was happening, because there are sometimes these arguments that, oh, okay, well, did Boyer, were the French really going to do that? Did the French have the capacity to do that? And I want to provoke by saying, it seems like Professor Voltaire, you don't think, you seem to suggest that the French at that time, given what was happening in Algeria, because again, France wanted to colonize the whole world. I mean, even today, the French colonized it so well. You know, we still see it in Asia, everywhere. But you seem to suggest that perhaps they were not going to return and colonize Haiti. Whereas Professor Doe is saying, no, look at the archives. We have the proof is in the pudding, as they say. They are saying they have detailed ideas of not only that they were going to do it, but several times, but you have. So I would like to ask you to talk on that.
I think that until 1825, the signature of the ordinance by Charles X, French king has effectively the problem of how to recolonize Haiti. Because in 1815, when the Congress of Vienna, only French has the possibility to have commerce of slaves. So that means that the vision to recolonize Haiti. The problem is that French has, in my understanding, no capacity to recolonize Haiti. When you have an intervention of 40,000 soldiers in the expedition, you know you have to think of logistics. War is essentially logistics, it's not tactics, it's essentially logistics. French has no capacity to do that until certainly the discussions in the French ministry. You have the colonists, you have the merchants. The merchants want to reopen the commerce with Haiti. Until that, you have, for the embargo, they have with Haiti, Saint Barthélemy was a Swedish small colony, Saint Barth, but they sold as a neutral power French perfume, French wine, these give that at neutral commodities. Donc French until 1825. After 1825, and effectively after 1830, when you have a new government in France with the Orleans, French began the conquest of Algeria. It was a violent, it was a criminal activities. You have to read Bugeaud, who was the commander-in-chief of the French army, the Duc d'Aumale, you see that and you say, okay, it was a killing of thousands of people. It was a very savage repression of the population of Algeria. At the moment, Algeria will transform in French department. The war in Algeria lasts for 40 years. But after that, Algeria became the crown of the jewel. Events, in the sense that after 1830, we forgot a lot about Haiti. Now, French continue to put pressure that Haiti paid the annual for the debt, the annual for the discount. But I remember that in 1849 was when they sent an expedition to Haiti. Mais on pas de payer sur le bien, ben ok, nous pas accepter la bourse. Donc, à partir de ce moment, toute pression, c'est ce que les économistes, les historiens comme Gaïa ont appelé la double dette. Nous allons faire quoi pour nous payer, ça ne va pas payer. Et donc, notre enchaînement avec la dette, et à ce moment-là, et la France bénéficiait pour ses marchandises d'un traitement préférentiel. Et juste ma finir avec ça, pendant sous du commerce extérieur haïtien, c'est-à-dire les biens de luxe calés pour minorité qui a dominé, relativement peu taxés. C'est ça la France vend par rapport aux biens de consommation courante qui allaient pour la population générale. Pendant tout le temps, ça, c'est ça, Edmond Paul en partie dénoncé, même s'il était dénoncé autrement, ça aurait l'impôt sur le café, c'est-à-dire que ces paysans haïtiens qui payaient les dettes là. Et donc, les petits paysans haïtiens, ils viennent produire et abeilles pour du miel, et donc un système de spéculateurs et de quelques exportateurs, généralement, ils n'ont pas de bourgeoisie haïtienne à l'époque, sont bourgeoisie étrangère. Ce sont des maisons de commerce extérieur, évidemment, qui prennent un triple rôle jusqu'à la Banque nationale sous Salomon, qui rôle banquier, qui rôle exportateur, et même leur vie ouverte, Banque nationale là, pas de fonction de crédit, contrairement à Salomon ou de la foresterie qui a négocié le dépensé. D'ailleurs, c'est ça que fait en hauteur, quand Frédéric Mast a été critiqué, lui-même, ça le fait, il vient service de trésorerie de l'État haïtien. Donc, on entre dans un système jusqu'à l'occupation américaine. Et à partir de l'occupation américaine, je veux dire, américain, parce que la France sortit ruinée de la Première Guerre mondiale, ils vont payer reliquat dette haïtienne vis-à-vis de la France. Et à partir de ce moment, on est dans l'autre système, côté central, à partir de l'occupation américaine, Citibank qui prend la relève. Et d'ailleurs, même si Haïti a fini sous sa tâche, Haïti payé on partit en 1935, quand l'État haïtien prend contrôle de la banque, l'Américain a continué jusqu'en 1947, sous-estimé, parce que et a siégé le conseil d'administration bancaire jusqu'en 1947. Parce que jusqu'en 1947, il a pris le pays en point de 1922. Donc, pour moi-même, question d'être là, il faut nous dire son système, ce que l'appelait la double dette, un système d'exploitation qui va empêcher tout type de développement dans le pays. Parce que toute partie, on va le payer, ou soit maintien et l'idiot, soit garder le budget, c'est l'armée, l'Assemblée nationale, système et les autorités politiques. Et en général, il y a très peu d'investissements qui sont faits, pour ne pas dire pas presque investissement, pour que nous voyons quand même tout le système scolaire. Oui, il y a cette dette-là, mais en même temps, tout une complicité entre ceux qui négocient les emprunts sur les places parisiennes et les banquiers français.
Yeah, I would say, I think we disagree, because, about 1825. Because in 1824, when another of the missions that Boyer sends to Paris fails, they try to negotiate with Louis XVIII, but he's dead set on suzerainty, which would make Haiti a protectorate. He offers all kinds of things. You could stay general of the island, we won't even meddle in your laws, and if the two people he sends don't have the power to make this agreement, it's not what they want, they reject it and the mission fails. When they come back to Haiti, Boyer orders all the correspondence and negotiations with the French to be published. They publish it in a book describing all of the different offers that the French have made over the years. And he's trying to show all the contradictions in their offers, the indemnities, the suzeraineties, we'll give you lettre de blanc, so you'll be considered white, all the different things that the French have proposed over the years. And at the end of this, the purpose is he tells the Haitian people they need to all work on fortifying the forts, gather their weapons, and be ready to fight. And this is in 1824. So it is surprising then when Mako arrives in 1825 with all of these ships and cannons that Boyer signs, unless you think about the fact that while they were willing to go to war, the one thing they couldn't combat was actually the economic embargo, in essence, which was going to be put into place. That was the threat. If we back up, there were people there who would have had memory of what the US embargo did. When the US embargo first arrived, it was announced in 1806, it caused all kinds of shortages, grain shortages, flour shortages on the island, and people died. The hospitals didn't have equipment that they needed to keep people alive. So the idea of this was not abstract, to say we're going to blockade all your ports and nothing will ever be delivered here again until essentially you starve to death. It's not abstract. It's a reality that could come to pass. So whereas they may have been willing to fight because potentially they knew that France didn't really have the means to sustain the fight, and also their motto was independence or death anyway. But then the French changed the game by creating this system whereby Haiti was going to effectively become a debtor nation when it hadn't been one before because no country was willing to lend them money. So they completely changed the nature of the game. And when you look at French colonialism, what you said about them being really great colonizers, is you see that that is what it is about. It is an economic system. When you see the colonial franc system that they put in place in West Africa, when you see that they became masters of a different kind of colonial enterprise whereby you could get independence, but you could never really be free of their presence. And that is, to me, clear in West Africa also as well from an economic standpoint.
Just one more question and thoughts before I turn it to the audience. So if we come back to the present, as many of us here know, and what 2022 New York Times have been exposing, what Haitian scholars have been saying for centuries, but now the New York Times say it and it's valid. And there's been a lot of back and forth, and the French, and France is not doing well economically. So we also have to contextualize what's going on right now, because many of the African countries are now saying, take your foot off our neck, we don't care, get out, when we look at what's happening in Niger, Burkina. So that's also complicated things, and we know there's no willingness. But some of the conversation I have been hearing about the debt are two parts. On the one end, the legal aspect. So I would like for you to talk about the legal, because my understanding, and again, I'm not a historian, is that we know the families who benefited from this. We know that the Eiffel Tower in part was built on the back of this debt, the interest. So how do legally, what can be done? So that's my first question. And my second question, because this conversation are happening, given the whole scandal with Petro-Caribbean, what's going on in Haiti right now, somebody will say, okay, Haiti does not have the capacity, even if France were to give the money, and we know the debt is very much connected to white supremacy, racism, dehumanization of Black people. What do you answer to these questions? And you can answer in French, Creole, English, Spanish.
Bon, d'abord, moi-même, si je ne pas défendre séparer Petro-Caribéa. Petro-Caribéa sont prêts. Ce n'est pas un don, c'est une subvention, c'est une dette liée, sont prêts de faire Haïti à des conditions très particulières. Donc, sont prêts pour nous séparer de questions de restitution.
Non, excusez-moi, question c'était plus,
Haïti
par
a une
exemple,
capacité
tant que tellement de magouilles,
oui, mais
tellement, tant que c'est un argument que nous sommes d'accord, nous sommes capables de dire peut-être son faux argument, mais comment pour restitution faite, côté que, ou bail comme là, et puis c'est dans poche au monde là. Comment, qui ça pour nous faire, pour nous taouer, qui j'en nous imaginer qu'on restitution capable de faire dans le moment ça, avec Jean Haïti hier.
Bon,
c'est avocat du diable.
Moi-même, moi, je pense que son illusion de penser que son bail va le résoudre à coup d'heure. En clair sur ça, que on est ma propre phrase que Clémenceau t'a dit. Clémenceau t'a dit, l'aime mon problème créer une commission. Après ça, Clémenceau, c'est le père de la victoire, c'était le premier ministre, président du Conseil en France au moment de la Première Guerre mondiale. Donc, qu'on a sauté, on pense qu'il aussi est opposé à la colonialisation, à la colonisation française. On rappeler ça, simplement. Donc, il dit, même au contexte, il dit, l'aime mon problème créer. Pasqua te dit, moi-même, l'aime mon problème créer une commission en dans commission. Bon, et pas oublier que Pasqua te dit, tout, je dis, l'aime gagne, je dis, et le te dit, mais, monsieur Pasqua, vous faites trop de promesses. Il te dit, les promesses n'engagent que ceux qui y croient. Bon, une fois ceci dit, moi-même, je pense que nous avons processus pour des questions politiquement des soulevements de l'histoire. Les abordés par des historiens, les abordés New York Times, les lancés articles une porte, ils ont écho, parce que tous nos Français reprennent question ça. Mais pas oublier tout que les Hollandais ou Sweet Mickey disaient bien son réparation morale. Nous avons un problème mais son réparation morale. C'est discours est fait. Il a inauguré le mémorial de l'esclavage en Guadeloupe, les livres en Haïti, il dit son réparation morale. Donc, nous reconnaissons ça, mais nous ne pouvons pas faire ça. Bon, nous connaissons ici, là, ça arrive souvent. Après, on finit détroncer, que ce soit le Guatemala, nous dit bon, nous regrettons. Vraiment, c'est ma faute, c'est ma très bonne faute, et puis bon, nous passons à autre chose. Donc, pour moi-même, son processus lié, dans lequel, où soulevons une question de restitution, il y a à la fois une dimension légale, parce que, effectivement, il faut changer des lois en France pour poser question ça. Il y a une dimension économique pour fixer qui montant réparation est. Il y a des dimensions historiques.
Restitution ou réparation?
Restitution. Tous les deux ont le même problème. La personne, réparation, je pense que c'est plus compliqué encore parce que personne ne va l'aborder. Parce que réparation a touché tout le monde. Il touche toute puissance coloniale, même la Suède, même la Norvège, qui à l'époque de la Suède, il touchait tout le monde. Tout le monde a participé à la promesse là. Tout le monde participait à la promesse, la traite publique. Tout le monde participait là-dedans, enfin les puissances occidentales. Maintenant, sous question restitution même, vous pensez pour un processus qui à la fois tenant compte de situations politiques en France, de la montée de l'extrême droite avec le Rassemblement national, des discours qui sont faits aujourd'hui en France. Jacques a vu en France, il a dit nous ça, eh bien, ce n'est pas aussi évident. Macron vient de faire une déclaration, puisque dans 2 ans, il ne parle pas encore. Et donc, s'ils font commission, ça ne va pas coûter rien. Il dit bon, ma commission, on va mettre des historiens qui parlent de toute façon, de temps pour constituer commission, de temps pour commission, font travail, de temps pour arriver sur l'île, il n'est pas président. Donc, nous ne connaissons pas si c'est Marine. Marine ne vient pas être président, mais si c'est l'extrême droite ou dans la droite, je ne peux pas aborder la question ça. Donc, il faut prendre son processus lié. Tu sais, moi-même, toujours dit, pour le monde qui était marqué sur ça, mais moi, mon qui était dit, moi, l'autre jour, il dit, moi, à l'âge où l'on va, ça toujours. Je me dis, monsieur, où l'on vous met ça toujours. Je me dis, oui, j'ai passé un pacte avec le combat, pas avec la victoire. Donc, nous, dans une situation, côté la public, nous connaissons que son processus qui va prendre temps, qui va résoudre, surtout dans l'état du monde actuel. Donc, nous connaissons que c'est qu'on va nous résoudre demain matin. Nous croyons que c'est une illusion de penser que par exemple, on va le. Et puis, bon, pas penser que même sous l'argent de l'État, par exemple, on va faire un chèque, mais chef là. C'est-à-dire que c'est des négociations, des créations d'institutions pour gérer les conditions liées, même pas une solution qui sauvera la problème. Mon a dit, effectivement, il y a des constructions d'infrastructures, il y a des mouvements. On pas quel problème, mais ça, c'est les commissions qui viennent pour essayer d'avancer.
Est-ce que bien fini en commission, c'est ça une plus grande question?
Oui, mais les commissions sont filables de l'hiver.
Est-ce que bien femme haïtien vaillant tant que grand toya? Parce que garder neuf yo, garder ça de face. Ça sont notre conférence, sorry.
Well, I would say on the question, I mean, I agree that the Pitua Caribe, it's a red herring. Because then you throw it that's irrelevant to the legal case. The legal case is separate from whatever is happening in Haiti right now. Doesn't mean that what happened in the past wasn't a crime against humanity. The other thing I would say is, if you read the communique very closely, it talks a lot about history and memory, and this is kind of Macron's thing. He says, we're going to study Algeria, pas d'excuses, no excuses, but that can be read very differently. Like, we're going to lay it all out, but we're also not going to apologize. Because during the summer where we had lots of protests, 2020, following the wake of George Floyd's killing, and there were Black Lives Matters protests all over the world, there were protests in France, and people talked about removing the Colbert statue. Colbert is the one who wrote the Code Noir. And Macron gave a speech and said, we will not remove any statues. We will remember. So remembering in history means something very different in the context of French governmental thought than it does to those of us who look at an expose as the first step towards restitution, as the first step towards rectifying a wrong. That is not what it means on the French side. And what the first thing I thought of after reading the communiqué was, if they would like some studies, then I will give them Frédéric Marcelin's book on the Indemnity from 1894. I mean, the idea that what we need in this moment is more study is actually ridiculous. Haitian historians have been writing voluminous things about every aspect of the indemnity. And yes, the New York Times did a favor in the sense of making the French government have to pay attention instead of just ignoring all the scholarship and studies and papers and books that have been written. So yes, for that, but it has simply led to, in my opinion, more desire to study and then to leave it at that. And I definitely think that this is an easy win for Macron on a certain level, because he will not be there to see the work of this commission, and who knows what kind of government will be in place.
And let me see, we published a book 2 years ago with Gusty, with Theodore, with the French economist Piketty, with French historian about the debt and about the restitution. And so you have a lot of work. Even a French guy, Blancpain, has made some studies on the restitution. All the books are published where the Jean-Pierre, a lot of people have published books on that question. And so it's not that we need, as you say, more studies.
That's right.
We know what happened, but it's a decision not to make a decision.
There is a mic that can go on, so if you can go and ask your question, I see you, maybe, if you can go on the mic, because we don't have it.
Okay, I don't have questions, but I can add to the discussion a little bit. I agreed with the university professor that they were going to re-enslave the Haitians. You said no, the French did not have capacity to do, but they were going to, and one of the reasons that they would have done it, the US would have supported them and give them the capacity. Because even though after, you have a lot of things, you have to read a little bit more, because after the independence, From 1804 all the way to 1862, the US was trading with Haiti, even though there was an embargo, right? And they were always at the ports and demanding payments or demanding not to pay for port fees and so on and so forth. However, the reason that France went back to Haiti is because in 1823, Alexander I of Russia recognized Haiti's independence to actually, how would you say, to antagonize France, because in 1812, France had the audacity to invade Russia. 45 times the size of France. They invaded Russia. And after they kicked France out of Russia, then Alexander I recognized Haiti's independence. And because of that, the US told France to go back to Haiti because they did not want Haiti to have a relationship with Russia since then. So that is one of the reasons why they went back and asked, well, if you don't want to be re-enslaved, you're going to have to pay us a debt. In other words, guess what? We are going to occupy you, not physically, but economically. So that's what happened. So I agree they would have re-enslaved Haitians if the Haitians would not have paid the debt. And it was a condition. That's why they paid the debt. It was a condition not to be re-enslaved, not to be reoccupied. And it's written clearly. We don't want to be re-enslaved. We don't want to be reoccupied. So therefore, we pay for our freedom. So a lot of people don't understand that, but that's exactly the condition and the interaction that occurred between France and Haiti. So that was my opinion.
Remember, in 1815, that the Cossacks were in Paris, occupied France, that the Russians occupied France. In 1815 is to restore Louis XV. In the French history, it was at the time the Cossacks, and they opposed the division of France and the restoration of the monarchy. It's very complex. It's a very complex.
I understand, but you know, the story in the New York Times that came out that showed how the debt destroyed Haiti's economy. That story has a political motivation behind it.
No, look at what happened with the embargo in different countries. You can compare.
I understand.
You can compare what's happening in the Caribbean with Cuba. That's 60 years of embargo.
Yeah, the New York Times article came out because there is a struggle between US and France in Africa right now. And a lot of people don't want to recognize that, but it is so. In West Africa, US definitely and ambitiously want France out so that they can come in. This is one of the struggles that is going between them.
And now the Chinese.
The Russians.
At the same
The
token, no. At the same token, yeah, no.
So there are a couple of questions. Jasmine had
in West Africa.
You don't
They are
know,
in East Africa.
you're a professor, so you can speak loud.
I know, but that is the struggle between the US
So
and
Jasmine
still
and then
support each other regardless. When it comes to wanting to maintain the imperialism, they will support each other regardless if there is struggle between them. And that's what we have to recognize. Whereas Africans, we tend to separate. When it's time to come together, we don't come together. We stay apart. But they will support each other, which is what the US is doing right now. It's still struggling with France to get France out of Africa. It's still supporting France.
okay, so
Thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate
yes, I see Jasmine and then this gentleman. We don't. Okay,
If you don't go to the mic,
yeah. If people can get in line, because we don't have, unfortunately, there is a hand mic. I think that gentleman was after.
Yes.
And if people can get in line.
Yes, a line and
Yes.
then.
Oui, merci, merci professeur Don et professeur Voltaire pour discussion et merci madame pour point de côté de le faire. Je pense que l'important et c'est pour ça que je me dis merci et qu'on paquet de bagages que vous mettez, le contexte historique qui est important. Mais je pense que dans 200 ans après, ça convient. Mes questions plus accélérées parce que l'on dit qui ça concrètement nous fait combien, on pose des problèmes à Haïti, capacité nous à absorber, à gérer, etc. Ça me paraît mais dit et que nous sommes capables de voir si un consensus possible qui était capable de faire sous ça. C'est que je pense qu'il y a un problème fondamental qui fait qu'aucune discussion importante et sérieuse pas qu'on a fait avec la France, ça, c'est que nous n'avons pas gagné un consensus national. Tout autant nous avons expliqué que nous n'avons pas de moyens pour prendre l'argent. Nous avons peut-être un millier d'Haïtiens qui ont écrit sur ça, qui ont discuté ça. Le professeur Dodili a un paquet de documents importants, intéressants, qui est écrit sur ça. Nous ne connaissons pas nous-mêmes, en tant qu'Haïtiens, qui s'en voulait. L'argent que nous payons, c'est l'argent que nous Haïtiens nous. Personne ne doit dire nous, pas comme ça nous faire avec lui, mais nous ne pouvons pas absorber. Le Voltaire dit comme ça, c'est pour ne pas faire à court terme. Pas de problème, nous avons décidé que nous avons fait, nous que nous l'argent que abandonné. Et puis, on mettait nos banques pour nos côtés, mais nous avons besoin de reconnaissance pour dire que l'argent, ça, c'est l'argent haïtien, c'est l'argent pas nous. Même si nous ne parlons pas de Haïti. Alors, si nous pouvons parler avec la France pour demander l'argent, s'il n'y a pas un fonds commun, s'il n'y a pas que nous tous ensemble, nous avons un bagage que nous voulons, que nous d'accord sur lui, c'est pour rien à faire. Il ne peut pas le mener de quel côté. Alors, ces questions, ça me posées, panel là, est-ce que nous pensons que l'État est capable possible que tu as un monde qui prend responsabilité institutionnelle, gouvernementale, société civile, pour que Haïtiens soient capables de gagner une parole, une seule, qui semble un bloc qui campait devant la France. Parce que c'est seulement le sang parce que nous avons opinion internationale, parce que c'est ça qui gagne, pas gagne ça. Opinion internationale, pour nous capables de quelle mesure nous sommes capables de monter sans besoin. Merci.
I apologize. Does everyone understand? I failed to translate. Does everyone understand?
Okay.
Okay. So tout le monde parle, tout le monde comprend le créole. Okay.
Jasmine, moi-même, je pense qu'effectivement, ouais, il y a des questions qui sont soulevées après 200 ans. Si je retrace la chronologie événement, évidemment, il y a des gens qui ont réfléchi sur la question de là. Mais en termes politiques, c'est à partir de 2003 qu'Aristide est venu soulever la question. Et puis c'est intéressant.
Parce que la France est fin déclarée que l'esclavage,
c'est un crime contre l'humanité avec Christian Taubira. Oui, non, mais il y a deux bagages. Non, mais il y a après Taubira. Taubira, c'est sur l'esclavage. Mais attention, non, parce que Régis devrait venir en Haïti. Ça, c'est parole qui tient. Non, mais attends. L'esclavage n'a rien à voir avec la restitution. La question, ça vient pour louer avec le contexte là, mais pas bien pour louer avec restitution. Restitution, l'autre, c'est pas mélanger les deux questions. Parce que question restitution, tout pays a l'opposé. À tout pays. Non, l'opposé. Attends, c'est une chronologie. Bon, deuxièmement, quand Aristide soulevé, c'est intéressant. Régis Debray qui l'a noté. Monsieur dit Aristide, vous allez perdre le pouvoir. Vous allez perdre le pouvoir. Mon film a fait sortir qui révélait la rançon de la tête par André Lanose, côté il a rappelé question ça. C'est-à-dire, monsieur Debray perd du pouvoir pour une raison très simple. À l'époque, c'est inacceptable pour la France. Peu après, c'est Sauvin gagnant ou gagnant. Le premier type qui reconnaît ça, ça a été François Hollande. Ils font discours. Il a inauguré le mémorial contre l'esclavage là et l'arrivée en Haïti très peu de temps. Et d'ailleurs, on a un discours là, il a publié, côté le devant avec Sweet Mickey, il dit écoutez, c'est une dette morale. Bon, ça c'est là. Il a filmé, là, on est capable de trouver tout discours là, il a écrit, Régis devrait écrire, il a dit, il y a des gens qui font comme ça. Bon, moi-même, c'est pas ça, je dis simplement pour l'on processus qui prend grand temps, parce que ce n'est pas simplement haïtien. Non, d'abord, même pour la reconnaître, du point de vue de la législation française, même pour d'abord, il faut reconnaître d'être là. Et deuxièmement, il y a des changements législatifs. Il ne faut pas oublier que, vivre en France, les ont restitués des œuvres d'art du Quai Branly, ils ont été restitués toute difficulté, ça prend, oublié de changer de loi. En France, on a restitué certaines œuvres. Pas besoin qu'on n'y a pas l'eau, si vous avez une restitution, combien de temps ça va le prendre? Il ne faut pas penser que ce n'est pas simplement sous position de l'État haïtien, il y a une position contexte mondial actuel, là, qui sont contextes effectivement qui pas propices à tout ça. Et mon contexte en France, avec une dette de plus de 3 000 milliards d'euros, effectivement, il va être très difficile, parce qu'il faut une opinion publique, il faut un changement législatif qui peut aborder lui. Et en plus, l'on ouvert son boîte de Pandore. L'on ouvert, on va ouvrir un processus pour obliger de reconnaître qu'on paquet l'autre type de réclamation. Pas oublier tout ça qui est passé avec, même soit suivre ça qui est passé après la Shoah, réclamation qui était faite pour restituer à qui nous y a restitué. Dans quel contexte ça restitué? Moi, simplement dit.
Non, mais restitution, est-ce que c'est pas remettre l'argent?
Réparation,
pour nous, réparation, c'est pour payer nous, pour les ancêtres nous qui ont exploité pendant des années. Restitution, c'est que nous provenons illégalement.
Oui,
on va demander pour le remettre l'argent.
Oui, mais pour l'on
les de l'argent là-bas, il faut remettre l'argent.
Nous d'accord,
nous d'accord. C'est pas la même histoire. Mais sur l'argent, ils prennent illégalement, ils prennent, forcent le sortir, c'est notre manière pour remettre nous l'argent.
Il faut d'abord.
Et si on s'est mis au débat,
on change pour répondre.
Nous arrivons à nous Haïti libre. Nous parlons pour nous temps pour remettre l'argent, mais il n'y a pas d'argent. D'accord, on a pas de processus. On a parlé, mais il faut nous, Jean-Jacques dire, parce qu'il faut nous organiser nous, pour nous voir ensemble, tête ensemble, pour les demander pour dire ça, demander ça. Et l'autre jour, on dit Jasmine ça. Moi-même, par rapport à notre institution, je parlais pour me faire Tiananmen Square. Si on prend l'argent pour ça, mais l'argent, nous sommes capables de faire certainement, mettez une infrastructure médicale, mettez une infrastructure scolaire, mettez l'argent au côté, mettons un groupe pour gérer l'argent, pour retirer Haïti dans l'état et la humaine que vous avez. Mais c'est là,
ok, d'accord, notre conférence. N'a fait ni pas payer, n'a fait pas bien modéré. Mes amis sont dit Washington, n'a fait ni pas payer, nous va dire mal modéré. Ok, n'a demandé docteur d'eau répondre et puis après, monsieur a capté très patiemment pour poser question.
No, I would just say briefly to Jasmine's question about the lack of consensus. I think that that's correct. I mean, I see people in the newspapers even writing editorials in Haiti saying we're going to give the money to criminals, etc. Like arguing in essence against restitution, actually. But at the same time, I do think that the question of Haiti's leadership and governance is consistently used as a reason not to address the bringing it before the International Criminal Court of Justice, for example, or there are mechanisms, except that we saw that with the case of the UN and cholera, we saw that it's not actually technically the Haitian people who need to rally around a decision, it's the rest of the world who is not allowing any of these cases to really move forward or to be treated with the seriousness that they would be treated if it were another country. Because when we look at the other cases that went before, for example, the International Criminal Court of Justice, the Holocaust even, like there was consensus from the world that this was a just and right thing to do, that these inquiries that happened after other genocides, the Armenian genocide, for example, but the idea that Haitians are not worthy of the recompense is part of the problem, that their government is not worthy, the people themselves, it's a part of the broader narrative that prevents the first part of the question from ever moving forward. But I do agree that there is also the question of what happens afterward. The only other thing I will say is that restorative justice is not just about money. there are other things that you have to do when you want to restore justice to a community. And we can look at those models from the United States and elsewhere. You restore justice to that community by mental health services for various, but by, all kinds of things. It's not aid, because aid suggests that the person giving it is then like owed a thank you. No, it's restorative justice, which means that it has to be undertaken in partnership with people living in Haiti right now, and they need to be asked, what do they want? And again, there won't be necessarily consensus, and it won't be the same for everyone everywhere, but that's also what's missing in the conversation, because it isn't just about money.
Thank you, Dr. Dodd, the gentleman who's been standing. Thank you for your patience. Merci.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening, Dr. Silla, for organizing this conference. Thank you for your discourses. It's not difficult to conceive that this idea of blaming the victim is nonsense. It's madness. Now, unless it's well documented that the slaves came from a number of countries in Africa. So unless those governments, those heads of governments accept that these people were not people, but animals, call them cows, pigs, whatever, they can make a claim that these countries who have taken their citizens to some kind of account so that the nonsense can stop. So, and it's really interesting to even today, in the age of the internet, so many, if you ask many Black people, Africans included, about Haiti, they know nothing. And considering that if it wasn't for what Haiti did, the Black world would still be in slavery. Now, with this being the case, why can't those governments do something so that those countries be accountable for what they did instead of them asking for ransom and continuing the nonsense that they're doing today?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is William
Mike,
Savary.
Mike, here you go, welcome.
My name is William Savary. I live in Haiti and been doing research in Haiti for the last 40 years. Thank you, friends. I appreciate your intervention, Dr. Doe. I appreciate your intervention. Thank you for your work. I have a couple of points that I wish to highlight that I think could help reinforce both of your presentations. The first point I want to make,
asked to kind of keep it brief. I saw a couple for the end.
The first point I need to make is the double indemnity. The first portion of the debt was paid through a bond issue offered by Lafitte or floated by Lafitte at 69%. That was the first portion of the debt. So the interest on that first portion is this double debt. The second point I wish to make is that the amount of the indemnity ransom, when it was agreed upon, it was really for the entire island. Correct me if I'm wrong. And I believe Guy may have been considering the potential of the island as a ratio, and the amount of the ransom as a ratio to the potential of the whole island. So, and then the resources, of course, of the eastern part. Third point I want to make: anytime somebody talks to me about the ransom that we've paid, I always love to tell them they should look at the value of gold at the time the ransom was paid. And if you look at the value of gold at the time the ransom was paid, remember we were living in the time of mercantilism, and the nation's wealth was measured in terms of how much gold they have. The amount of the ransom represented only about 90 tons of gold. I took my time and did the computation. And today, France's gold reserve is about 2,700 or 2,800 tons. So we're really not talking about a lot of money if we measure it in terms of gold. It's a percentage of the gold reserve. So you look at what percentage of 90 of the 2,700 does 90 represent? It gives you how much gold you can invest. Not money. And the gold can be put in the national central bank and used as backup for our currency, increase the value of the currency, reduce inflation, a lot of other things that gold is used for.
Thank you on that good platform. Okay, I think I saw one or two other hands. Any other questions? Yes. And so the lady over there had a question, Mary Nancy.
Yeah, you can go. You can go.
If you can speak loudly, maybe you can stand up if you don't want to use the mic.
About the commission itself, how was it formed? Who's part of it? Who gave them the mandate to negotiate with the French for the entire Haitian people? Can you give some light?
The new commission?
Yes.
The new commission
Yes.
is not formed yet. It's one French historian, and Bustigaya was named by the Haitian government to be part of this commission. But you don't have any commission yet. You have two co-presidents of the commission.
But how about on the Haitian part?
They named Bustigaya as the representative of Haitian part of the commission.
So
She's
which
a-
government, the current government?
Yes.
Yeah, there is no government.
No, it's another issue. But I can ask William, when you ask that the eastern part of the country at the time in 1825, they helped pay the interest of the debt until 1842 or 1843. But we have to remember that part of the Dominican nationalism, they said, we're not involved in that. That's Haitian part. They make us pay for a debt we didn't have. At that time, there were no plantation system or few plantation system in what will become the Dominican Republic. And so you have the problem that these people, we're not involved in that. And it added the nationalism after the earthquake in 1842 in Cape Haitian. The people informed that the Haitian government doesn't respond. And you have three movements at the time. In the Dominican Republic, the new Dominican Republic, but also in the northern part of Haiti. There was a document where the generals from the north, we claimed a confederate state between the north, the Dominican part, and the west and southern part of Haiti. They said, we will have a pact, but we want a new confederate state. That for that reason, that they named three generals from the north after Boyer, Guerrier, Michel, and Guerrier, Michel, Pierrot. That for that reason, it's an issue on the 19th century we have to address, or maybe we need more studies on that.
Mary Nancy, I think, has a question.
Yes. Hi. Thank you so much.
You can speak up, maybe get to the mic.
Thank you. I don't like talking in mics.
Okay.
But my question is actually a comment. My concern about the restitution is when I was in France, the Claude Reed, the Guadeloupean French-born Guadeloupean activist, historian, he has a great website, and his activism when I arrived to France in 2015 included restoring the statue of the Dumas père et fils and grandson to the 17th because the Nazis had broken it down, and then the French government never saw fit to restore them. So he had this decades-long activism to restore it, which was restored. I went to the commemoration, and I went with him to other activism. And one of the things that I heard from a group of other Caribbean, Martinicans and Guadeloupeans, was that if this money is returned to Haiti, how do they ensure that it's going to be used properly without corruption? And let me tell you what I was hearing in the back of what they were saying. Is that a contingency of French people, regardless of what their color is going to arrive with the money to whatever, oversee it. And that's my concern. I don't want any more recolonization of Haiti by France, along with people from the Caribbean, Martinique, Guadeloupe, or Guyana. That's my one concern. My main concern about all of this is the feminization of poverty that the indemnity caused. My mother was born in 1948, my father in 1944. None of their mothers were ever able to keep their children. And these are people who direct descended of some of these generals. It's a real shame that there were never really good enough schools. My grandfather and so many people were denied education. If the family had a little bit of money, they sent the boy who seemed smarter than anyone else. But before that problem didn't exist. They spent so much time and energy of their resources paying back this money, and the families had to make decisions that oftentimes seemed to be hurt the girls more than the boys. Everyone ended up being hurt, but it just seemed to me, especially since when I found out that they cut trees that France used to make mahogany furniture. I mean, they can get rid of that. I mean, if it's antique from 200 years ago, they can sell it and pay me back what is old. I have no sympathy in my heart for people who spend all the extra discretionary income going on vacation, smoking cigarettes, and drinking whiskey. None whatsoever. They've taken my children, my books, my everything. Okay, so that's it. That's what I have to say.
Well, I would just say, I mean, you might want to check out, if you haven't seen it already, Grace Sanders Johnson's book, White Gloves, Black Nation. It's really a great book about definitely the struggle of Haitian women through vast time periods, late 19th all the way up to almost the present, essentially, including to get the vote, many things, but schooling is certainly a big issue. Things in the legal realm as well. The fact that one of the big points she makes in her book, which is important and needs more elaboration, is when Boyer made the Code Rural, the reclassification of Haitian women as minors, which he got from the Code Napoleon because he constructed it with Blanchet, a Frenchman who encouraged him to adopt principles from the Code Napoleon into Haiti's laws and legal structures, and those laws remained, some of them for a very, very long time. And so a lot of that, like, it's directly related, in other words, to the Code Rural coming about after the ordinance was signed, so that the ordinance could be paid, that the amount could be paid, and then the legal, like, so what happened to women in that, it's all folded in together.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you.
I think maybe one last question, and one thing, well, two last questions, Johnny and Narcisse. But one thing I would like to add to what Nadine says, we have to understand that the French wants to use Haiti as an example, so Martinique, Guadeloupe, Guyane. So I will take what many of them, I mean, I know there are some independencies, with a grain of salt, because it's also this idea, look at Haiti. If you dare become independent, you will be the new Haiti. We won't be able to use the fusée d'Ariane in Guyana. So that has to also be contextualized. I call them colonies, even though the Département d'Outre-mer, that's another word. So we have to put that in that context. So Johnny and then Jasmine.
Okay, thank you very much. I thought this was a pretty interesting panel, conversation, and full of chock full of facts, and I hope that they've all been used to good and they will be used to good, put to good use, in the long run. I don't have a question, I just want to tell you number one. Tomorrow there's going to be a conversation about how to deal with the reparations. I'm a member of a Newtown group called the Comité Haitien Afro-Descendant, which deployed a lot of resources the other day when the UN Permanent Forum of People of African Descent held its fourth session of the UN, and we were very forceful in demanding reparations. The idea behind the organization is that, first of all, it's called Comité Haitien Afro-Descendant, primarily because, to some extent, we want to make sure that Haitians do reconnect with their African roots. To a certain extent, 1825, as far as that's concerned, is a marker. It's a marker that basically says this is, and you can take it, and perhaps I'm wrong. But it's a marker, as far as I'm concerned, that says Haiti became, as a result of the signing of the ordinance, a neo-colony of France. So the challenge that we have today, frankly, it's not about simply getting some money back. It's really establishing once again the independence of Haiti. The Haitians have become independent, and they have to rid themselves of a number of prejudices that they have gained throughout centuries, throughout years, that have been handed down for centuries, that made them feel inferior to French or to the white world. So that's number thing. Second thing is that obviously I agree with France. It says it's a long struggle. It is going to be a long struggle. I'm not going to see the benefits of that struggle, but I am, and I'm inviting everyone in this room to be part of that struggle, so that struggle continues. But one of the things that we have to do is really get our act together. I mean, we can't just, obviously we have a lot of sentiment and so forth, but in order to fight, in order to regain the kind of, or to make the kind of advances that we need to have, we need to make sure that we are speaking all in the same voice, that we are speaking in unison, that we are marching in lockstep, so that to some extent, and we have to make sure that we go forward together. Otherwise, we are going to be discussing endlessly about whether or not we are capable of governing ourselves. Because this is what it's all about. When you're questioning the fact that, well, we don't know what's going to happen with the money if it's restored. Well, let's zoom in a little bit. If the money is restored, I mean, I've got 50 people here in this room, who are highly qualified in their own ways to manage public sector issues and to be forcefully involved in the education, healthcare, and whatever economic initiative. So let's stop the nonsense. Let's get together and make sure that we go forward.
Some of us cannot even agree that France owes us. Start from the beginning.
Okay, I think, okay,
Would you please go to the mic? It's being streamed. The people cannot hear you from where you're sitting. People online. No, it's not even that.
Huh?
Moi je viens en France. Si on comprend un peu ce que la presse française fait récemment, c'est qu'il n'y a pas, la presse française, de manière générale, pensait qu'il faut que la France restitue l'argent. vous m'avez regardé, on a remarqué que ce soit à la télévision, dans les journaux, bon sorte de consensus général, je crois que la presse, pour que la France restitue. Bon, dans une pensée qui est essentielle, ce dont nous avons besoin, c'est le principe, n'est-ce pas, de la restitution. Nous avons besoin que l'État français, pour un bon document, ce serait l'idéal, que l'État français reconnaisse que son art terrible, ça terriblement, et que c'est. Voilà, c'est tout, quelque chose dans ce domaine. Maintenant, on dit de questions légales. Je crois que c'était le 21 mai 2001, Taubira prend une loi qui dit que l'esclavage est un crime contre l'humanité. Un cabinet Aristide de l'époque, on appelait Claude, frère, un cousin de Jean-Claude. Monsieur, moi-même, personnellement, à l'époque, nous en Haïti, je dis que ça est essentiel, il faut que nous avancions sur c'est un cabinet Aristide. Et c'est après que, en 2003, que Aristide fait déclaration là, qui sortit dans le bon. N'est-ce pas? Pour Français. On a ces deux Français paniqués, etc. Maintenant, question ça arrivé au cœur de l'État français. C'est une avancée importante. Discussion sur est-ce que nous allons faire un chèque ou bien nous allons la conduire. C'est de la foutaise. Excusez-moi, mais bon. Non, mais. La question en plus, on a dit que la France pauvre, 21 milliards de dollars, encore dit, c'est 4 spins. Parce que le gilet jaune, gilet jaune, il y a quelques années, dans la rue, on n'a rien dedans. Plusieurs millions ont été trouvés. Comme un miracle, n'est-ce pas? Maintenant, qu'il y ait une commission mixte pour discuter de ça, ça me paraît. Non, mais ce dont nous avons besoin, c'est la reconnaissance, c'est la ligne politique de l'État français pour lui dire non, voilà, bien restitution. Le reste, qui s'en va pas comme là, ça n'a décidé. Mais bon principe qui a été établi, on est en discussion et bien entendu, il faut qu'il y ait différents aspects là-dedans, militantisme, diplomatie, etc. Mais le principe est établi que injustice que les faits nous, injustice à mettre nous là et là, bien entendu, moi-même, je dis que on une volée dans l'histoire de l'IA, n'est-ce pas, qui contribue et tout, dans le problème de justice, ça, c'est pas ça qu'on va discuter. On va discuter avec l'État français. Vous voyez? Que rien ne voit, nous, et pas déjà mon bon, non, nous avons là, nous avons des gens qui se volent. Mais c'est pas ça qu'on va discuter. D'accord? C'est pour ça que je n'ai raison. Il dit que c'est pour nous mettre d'accord sur notre main sans affaire, n'est-ce pas? Pour nous sûr que bon point central, c'est restitution, et puis pour nous évaluer, et puis pour le reste, c'est nous-mêmes qui nous décidons.
Je pense que pour nous clôturer, nous tout pour merci. I want to thank everybody, and I think to wrap up, I would just like to add, we have to have the young people in the center of this conversation, both in terms of youth and in terms of gender. Oftentimes, we are having this conversation and there are not enough youth. Haiti is over 50% people under 25, I think the latest statistic. And if you have not seen it, I really encourage you to watch Raoul Speck, Federal Assistance. He talks about that. I'll just read part of a quote. He said, La corruption et la stupidité n'est pas une spécialisation caribéenne ou africaine. Corruption and stupidity, and he said we live it is important to understand that we live in a system that is profoundly and fundamentally rotten and contradictory, one which does the very opposite of what it purports to do and presents itself differently than it really is. We exist in an eminently structured economic context whose founding principles are that money and profit are the overarching factors which determine the totality of actions, connections, and relationships among nations, which determines who is rich and who is poor, who exploits, who is a victim, and who is rewarded. As far as I know, neither corruption nor stupidity nor mismanagement is exclusively a Caribbean or African specialty. That's what I would say. And I'll end on that. Merci en plus. Come back tomorrow. Et en fait, de merci ma petite docteur Serra du dernier parole.
Merci en pile. Indemnity, docteur Cécile Maximien, professeur Do, professeur Voltaire, merci pour la conversation ça que vous faites. Nous connaissons, oui, nous connaissons le processus. Mais nous commençons ce processus. Et il y a un travail extrêmement important parce qu'il faut nous prendre ça tout. Donc, paquet de côté a fait même cas des conférences. Le Collège de France, en juin, a regardé les indemnités. Et Association études haïtiennes, en octobre, on était chita s'opposer ça à tout. Il faut pas en parler. Il faut le parler et ça fait partie du processus là. Mais en même temps, il y a un monde dans ça là que vous devez reconnaître, c'est Stéphanie Delia, qui est directeur exécutif. Mais qui sont avocats. Objectif, nous tous, dans différentes conversations, c'est faire association avocats haïtiens à travers les États-Unis. On met tête ensemble pour penser légalement tout à qui ça, eux-mêmes, ils ont contribué dans la bataille. C'est un objectif que nous voulons et une recommandation que nous avons fait d'en faire. Maintenant, dis-moi ça, merci avec nous. Et puis, on a dit, parole là, continue à parler, et demain, si Dieu veut, nous. Mais avant de quitter mon salon, aller quitter tout ça, et professeur auxiliaire. En été, ici, là, nous avons beaucoup qui relèvent Haiti University, Global Education at Home. And it's for CUNY students who have completed 15 credits. I would love to invite all three of you to come speak to these youngsters. And we are in our third year, so there'll be 3 cohorts together. So we could do one session where you have a panel and engage with about 50 young people, much younger than what you see. So that we can prepare fellow with it. Parce que nous pas pour aller à bail comme là, mais nous faut pas aller pour dire pour connaître pour bail comme là. Après nous donner
I'm making sure that I'm not doing this right.